And so to say fortnight to an American really could be anything. Honestly, it could be referring to a night at the fort for all we know. Hi and welcome to the Girl Gone London channel. In today's episode, we're talking about British words or phrases that I had never heard before moving to the UK. The first word on my list, or I guess multiple words, phrase, is wheelie bins. Americans don't really call them wheelie bins, and if you're British, you know exactly what a wheelie bin is. We talk about them oddly a lot on this channel, and I would say that not all bins or trash cans or garbage cans in America actually do have wheels. I've definitely lived in places where the standard garbage can doesn't have wheels. You kind of just drag it, but many do have wheels, but even so, we don't call it a wheelie bin because we don't call it a bin. And yeah, we'd call it just like a garbage can or a trash can. The next phrase on my list is the phrase, "What are you on about?" Americans don't tend to say this. We would say something like, "What are you talking about?" But the phrase, "on about," "I don't know what you're on about," or "what are you going on about," is really kind of a Britishism that isn't used as much in the US. Now, many Americans could probably figure out what you mean, but I've also read stories online of people having no idea, because in America, the phrase "on something" is maybe you're on some sort of medications or you're on top of something. So the phrase, "what are you on about," just doesn't translate as much. The next one is the British use of the word fortnight. Many Americans have absolutely no idea what this means, and a fortnight in the UK refers to 2 weeks. There's really no context clues here, and so to say fortnight to an American really could be anything. Honestly, it could be referring to a night at the fort for all we know. So this is very helpful to know if you work with any American colleagues or maybe are contacting an American business, that if you say the word fortnight, you're probably gonna have to explain yourself and should say something like 2 weeks or every 2 weeks or something like that. Now the next word on my list, and this kind of refers to a lot of different words, but I'll use the example of the word whilst. So in America, we don't do the ST at the end. So in the phrase, "whilst you were out," we would say "while you were out." And we would think of whilst as being an incorrect term. It's not a word that's used in the US. The next one on my list is the word sweets. Americans do know the phrase sweet. Basically everything that you eat in America is sweet. But we don't say sweets. We would say candy or candies. And this also kind of goes along with like the nickname for sweets, where people say like sweeties. It does not translate in the US. We wouldn't really know what you were talking about. Whereas this is a very commonly used word in the UK, especially around kids who are eating candy or sweets. And the next on my list is the word coach, not meaning this kind of coach because Americans know what that is, but the word coach meaning like a large bus. And as opposed to something like a public bus, a coach in the UK typically refers to a large bus that is hired to take people on like a longer journey, like a coach trip from London to Manchester or something like that. Americans would just view this also as a bus. So we would say bus for a more local public transportation kind of bus, and we would say bus for something that Brits call a coach. So if you say to an American that you are going to hire a coach, they're probably going to think you're going to hire one of these for whatever activity you're trying to do. You're going to have to explain the word coach as it relates to transportation. Another interesting British phrase that we don't use as often in the US is to do up a house. So it's just the kind of term of to do up. So an American would say something like, "I'm going to renovate my house." We do have the term fixer-upper, so they might say, "I'm going to fix up my house," or "I'm going to renovate my house." But the term "I'm going to do up," "I'm going to do up a house," or like "do up your coat" or something like that is not a phrase commonly used in America. We would tend to be more specific, so we wouldn't say "do up your coat." We would say "zip your coat." Another British phrase that is not commonly heard in America is the term lie-in, to mean sleeping in, to have a lie-in. And this is interesting because in many places in America, we would say, "Oh, I'm going to sleep in tomorrow," or "I'm going to get to sleep in." We wouldn't necessarily treat it as something that we could have. So we wouldn't say that we were going to have a sleep in, like you would say in the UK that you're going to have a lion. If we work at a zoo, we might say that we get to have a lion, but we're not going to say that we get to have a lion. The next word on my list is Morish, meaning basically something that you just can't stop eating and you want more of. It's a great British word, it's just not really used that much in the US. We would say something like, "Oh, I find it addictive. And the last word on my list is the word scheme. Now, there are multiple definitions for scheme, but in the UK, the one that Americans don't use is like a government scheme or a pension scheme or a graduate scheme. Scheme in the UK can sort of refer to what an American might call like a program. If you use the word scheme in America, you're really talking about scheming. So it's kind of like the villain, how the villain schemes in a movie to get what they want. We would say the internship program or the government program, or I'm trying to think of other words that would be used instead of scheme. But definitely there's a lot of like schemes in the UK, and they're not bad things. It's just like, I don't know, it's just a government scheme. Whereas Americans tend to think of the word as kind of a bad thing, like a Ponzi scheme, like there's some sort of malicious intent to it. Now that brings me to the end of this video. As always, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.